In the darkness between heartbeats, I have killed 47 witches, and each death whispers my name in languages that shouldn't exist. The latest scream still echoes in my mind, not through my ears, which hear only silence, but through the psychic void that surrounds me like a funeral shroud. They say the witch-touched die twice. Once when my blade finds their throat, and again when the warp entities feeding on their terror realize the meal has been poisoned by my null presence. My name was once spoken with warmth by those who loved me. Now it exists only in the sealed records of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, filed away the moment I took the vows that would steal my voice forever. I am Sister Kaelen of the Silent Sisterhood, and today I hunt witches in the name of the Golden Throne, carrying death to those whose only crime was being born different in a universe that has forgotten the difference between protection and genocide. The irony isn't lost on me that those who safeguard humanity from its greatest psychic threats cannot speak of the horrors we've witnessed. We are the Emperor's silent guardians, the null-born daughters who stand between the Imperium and the madness that dwells beyond the veil. Our very presence is anathema to the warp-touched, our souls blank voids that cause Psykers to weep blood and demons to recoil in terror. If you crave more tales from the dark millennium where heroes sacrifice everything for duty, hit that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who support the channel, and there are countless silent wars yet to be told. Standing in the observation deck of the black ship Nemesis Incarnate, I watch the sprawling hive city of Tertius Prime spread across the viewport like a cancerous growth. 60 billion souls live in those towering spires and undercity warrens, and our intelligence suggests at least 300 unsanctioned Psykers hide among them. My bolt pistol hangs heavy at my side, each blessed round inscribed with nullification wards that will grant swift death to the witch-cursed. The executioner's sword across my back has tasted the blood of 47 Psykers across 12 different worlds. Today, it thirsts for the 48th. Sister Superior Valdris approaches, her power armor's servos whispering prayers of silence. Even among the sisterhood, she stands apart, a living void so profound that nearby lumens flicker and machine spirits grow restless. Her scarred hands move in our battle cant, the finger speech that allows coordination without breaking our sacred vows of silence. Primary target confirmed, her gestures convey. Astropath Tertius, breaking containment protocols. Secondary targets detected in underhive sectors 7 through 12. Rules of engagement. Total purge. No survivors. I nod, feeling the familiar weight of duty settle around my shoulders like a burial shroud. The Astropath compound squats on Tertius Prime's northern spire like a metallic tumor, its psychic wards struggling to contain the sanctioned Psykers within. But something has gone wrong. The facility's Vox transmissions have become increasingly erratic, filled with whispered reports of bleeding walls and voices in the static. When an astropath station goes dark, it usually means one of two things. Either the Psykers are dead, or something far worse has taken their place. My null aura extends roughly 15 meters in all directions, an invisible sphere of psychic negation that makes reality more solid, more real. Inside this void, the warp cannot touch us. Daemons cannot manifest. Psykers find their powers faltering and their connection to the immaterium severed like a cut nerve. It's a blessing that feels like a curse, especially when I see the relief in a dying witch's eyes as my presence grants them a moment's peace from the screaming voices in their head. The shuttle bay doors grind open, revealing the atmospheric craft that will carry us to the surface. 20 Sisters of Silence, each a walking null zone, each sworn to hunt the witch wherever she might hide. Our pilot, a nervously devout serf named Corvin, makes the sign of the Aquila and mutters prayers as we board. He's flown us on 7 different purge operations, and each time he looks a little older, a little more haunted. The proximity to our null presence doesn't just negate psychic power, it makes normal humans feel hollow, empty, as if something fundamental has been carved out of their souls. As the shuttle descends through Tertius Prime's toxic atmosphere, I watch the city's lights flicker past like dying stars. Somewhere in those hive levels, unsanctioned Psykers cower in the darkness, praying to false gods or trying desperately to suppress the powers that mark them for death. Some are innocents, children born with the curse, elderly citizens whose abilities manifested late in life. Others are willing servants of the ruinous powers, their souls already claimed by entities that feast on human suffering. I don't make distinctions. The Emperor's justice is absolute, and my duty is clear. The witch must die, whether she's 8 years old or 80, whether she weeps for forgiveness or spits curses with her final breath. In the grim darkness of the far future, mercy is a luxury humanity can no longer afford. The first target awaits. The Astropath compound's main entrance hangs open like a screaming mouth, its reinforced doors torn from their hinges by something possessing inhuman strength. The psychic wards that once contained the facility's sanctioned Psykers lie shattered, their blessed silver fragments scattered across blood-soaked marble. I step through the threshold, and immediately the oppressive weight of recent warp manifestation presses against my null aura like oil against water. Sister Valdris signals for combat formation. We move through the corridors in practiced silence, our boots making no sound on the gore-slicked floors. The walls bear scorch marks from psychic discharge, not the controlled channeling of trained astropaths, but the wild, desperate flailing of minds pushed beyond their breaking point. Emergency lumens flicker in dying gasps, casting shifting shadows that seem to move independently of their sources. The first body lies crumpled in an alcove, still wearing the simple robes of an astropath in training. Her eye sockets weep tears of crystallized blood, and her hands are frozen in the gesture of warding against some unimaginable horror. But it's what surrounds her that makes even my hardened soul recoil. The air itself bears psychic scarring, reality twisted into impossible angles where her death screams tore holes in the veil between worlds. My Auspex crackles with interference as we penetrate deeper into the compound. The device's machine spirit struggles against the lingering warp contamination, its readings fluctuating wildly between normal atmospheric conditions and environmental impossibilities. According to the scanner, the temperature in the next corridor is simultaneously 37 degrees Celsius and absolute zero. The atmospheric pressure reads as both standard and the crushing void of deep space. We find the first survivor in the archives, huddled behind overturned data slates and weeping quietly. Sister Mordiana moves to investigate, but I place a restraining hand on her shoulder. Something about the figure's posture triggers my combat instincts. The way their shoulders shake suggests sobs, but the rhythm is wrong, too measured, too calculated. The survivor turns, and I see my caution was justified. What was once a junior astropath now bears the telltale signs of warp corruption. Skin that shifts between flesh tones like oil on water, eyes that reflect depths no human gaze should possess, and a smile that contains too many teeth arranged in geometries that hurt to perceive. "Sisters," it whispers, its voice a harmony of tones that shouldn't coexist. "Such beautiful silence you bring. But can you make the screaming stop?" My bolt pistol clears its holster in one fluid motion. The blessed round takes the corrupted Psyker center mass, its nullification wards flaring as they come into contact with warp-tainted flesh. The creature's death shriek reverberates through frequencies only psychically sensitive individuals can hear. But in the protective void of my null aura, it dies as a mere man, afraid, alone, and grateful for the silence. This is my 48th kill. The deeper we penetrate, the worse the contamination becomes. Walls weep ectoplasm that evaporates under my null presence. Doorways open onto rooms that shouldn't exist, their impossible dimensions collapsing back to normal reality as we approach. In the main communion chamber, we discover what triggered the facility's catastrophic breakdown. Astropath Prime Matthias lies sprawled across his psychic focusing throne, his body bearing the physical trauma of a mind that tried to process too much cosmic horror at once. The neural interface cables that once connected him to the facility's communication array have fused with his skull, creating a grotesque crown of blessed silver and corrupted flesh. But he's still alive, barely. His lips move soundlessly, forming words in languages that predate human civilization. Sister Valdris approaches cautiously, her hand signals indicating she wants to attempt communication. I shake my head. Whatever broke this man's mind is still present, still hungry, and still looking for new hosts. But Valdris is Sister Superior for a reason. She survived encounters that killed dozens of other sisters, and her instincts have proven reliable on countless hunts. She kneels beside the dying astropath, placing her gauntleted hand on his forehead. The contact causes him to convulse violently, his back arching as her null presence wars with the warp contamination in his brain. For a moment, blessed clarity returns to his eyes. His mouth opens and blood-flecked words spill out. The merchant fleet, Kroger's bounty, trafficking, unsanctioned, hundreds of them, sector-wide conspiracy. They know we're coming. Then his heart stops, and whatever cosmic horror had been using his vocal cords to speak retreats back into the spaces between spaces, denied its final message by the astropath's merciful death. Sister Valdris stands, her scarred features grim behind her helm's optical lenses. Her battle cant conveys urgent information. Intel compromised, primary hunt target identified. Merchant vessel Kruger's bounty. Suspected psyker trafficking operation. Immediate pursuit authorized. I check my bolt pistol's ammunition counter and ensure my executioner's sword sits properly in its magnetic clamps. The facility around us bears the scars of what happens when unsanctioned psykers die in fear and desperation, their final moments tearing holes in reality itself. If this Kroger's bounty truly carries hundreds of such individuals, the hunt has only just begun. The dying astropath's words echo in my mind as we extract from the compound's ruins. Kroger's bounty, a name that sets my teeth on edge even before our ship's cogitator arrays begin their data search protocols. Within moments of transmitting the intel back to the Nemesis incarnate, confirmation arrives that chills my blood. The merchant vessel departed Tertius Prime's orbital docks 3 hours ago, its manifest listing agricultural supplements and textile shipments bound for the Mordian system. But the deeper records tell a different story. Kroger's bounty has made irregular stops at 17 different worlds over the past 6 months, always departing within hours of unusual psychic disturbances planetside. The pattern is clear to anyone trained to recognize it. Someone is collecting unsanctioned psykers like a dealer gathering contraband, and our investigation has forced their hand. Sister Valdris receives confirmation of our pursuit orders through her vox bead, the encrypted transmission crackling with urgency. The black ship's engines are already cycling to maximum burn, Argella fields reinforcing for immediate warp translation. But something in her expression suggests the news brings complications rather than simple hunt protocols. Her battle cant explains the problem. Kroger's bounty entered warp transit 47 minutes ago. Course projection indicates emergency translation to avoid Imperial interdiction. Estimated passenger manifest, 312 souls. Unknown number of psykers aboard. 300 souls trapped in the warp with an unknown number of untrained, terrified psykers. Even with Geller field protection, The merchant vessel is essentially a floating time bomb. Unsanctioned witches in the Imperium are like bloody meat thrown to starving sharks. Every demon, warp entity, and chaos manifestation within light years will be drawn to their psychic emanations like iron filings to a magnet. The shuttle carrying us back to the Nemesis incarnate shudders as it passes through the atmospheric membrane of the ship's landing bay. Our pilot, Corvan, looks even paler than usual, his hands trembling on the control yoke. Extended exposure to our null presence during combat operations takes its toll on normal humans, but I suspect his fear runs deeper than mere psychic dampening effects. "Sister," he whispers, breaking protocol by speaking directly to me. My daughter serves in the Mordian Iron Guard. If that ship reaches the system..." I cannot respond with words, but I place my gauntleted hand on his shoulder in what I hope conveys reassurance. The truth is grimmer than his fears imagine. If Kroger's bounty completes its warp jump with unsanctioned Psykers aboard, the demon incursions that follow could consume entire worlds. A single untrained witch can tear holes in reality large enough for lesser demons to manifest. Hundreds of them, all screaming in terror as the warp entities close in. The Nemesis Incarnate's command center thrums with barely controlled activity as we dock. Tech adepts chant binary prayers over cogitator arrays, while Navigator Quintus plots our pursuit course through his meditation chamber's psychic resonance equipment. The ship's complement of battle sisters move through final combat preparations, their power armor's machine spirits singing hymns of war in electronic harmonics. But it's the ship's astropath choir that draws my attention. 12 sanctioned Psykers sit in protective alcoves, their minds linked through blessed neural interfaces as they attempt to track our quarry through the warp's chaotic currents. Even from across the command deck, I can see the strain on their faces as they push their abilities to the limit. Their leader, Astropath Prime Jerichus, suddenly convulses in his restraint throne. Blood seeps from beneath his eye coverings as his mouth opens in a soundless scream. The other choir members begin to shake in sympathetic resonance, their psychic link carrying whatever horror he's witnessing directly into their consciousness. Sister Valdris signals for immediate intervention. I approach the choir's protective circle, feeling the familiar resistance as my null aura encounters the psychic barriers designed to contain their abilities. The blessed wards flicker and dim as my presence disrupts their harmonious flow, but the effect brings immediate relief to the tormented astropaths. Jerichus gasps, his voice raw with pain. I see them, the merchant ship. They're not running from us. They're running from something else, something in the warp, something that's been hunting them for weeks. His words carry implications that make my blood freeze. If something in the Imperium has been stalking Kroger's bounty, then our pursuit has become infinitely more dangerous. Warp predators that hunt ships are ancient, powerful entities, the kind that view entire crews as minor snacks between larger meals. The ship, damaged, Geller field fluctuations, passengers screaming, the Psykers, they're manifesting. They can't control it. Reality is tearing open. Jerichus collapses, his neural interface smoking as the vision overwhelms his sanctioned abilities. The other choir members slump in their restraints, their minds temporarily severed from the warp to prevent cascade contamination. Sister Valdris's battle cant conveys the obvious conclusion. Kroger's bounty is compromised, multiple demon manifestations probable, crew survival unlikely. Psyker containment failed, but her next gesture chills me to the bone. Translation complete. We're entering the same warp storm. Estimated contact in 6 hours. Emperor preserve us all. Through the command center's armored viewports, I watch the familiar blue-white flash of warp translation flicker across our hull. The Nemesis Incarnate slides sideways into unreality, chasing a doomed merchant vessel through a realm where thought becomes substance and nightmares take physical form. 6 hours until we discover whether we're hunting prey or walking into a trap that's been waiting for us since before the Imperium was born. The warp storm tears at our Geller fields like claws scraping against cathedral windows. From the observation deck of the Nemesis Incarnate, I watch impossible colours writhe through the Immaterium's chaotic currents, each hue representing emotional resonances that no human mind should perceive. Our ship's navigator, Quintus, has been sealed within his warp-eye chamber for 4 hours now, his psychic sight guiding us through routes between demon-spawned maelstroms toward our quarry. Sister Valdris signals the alert I've been dreading. Target acquired. Kroger's bounty detected at bearing 27 Mark IV. Hull integrity compromised. Multiple warp breaches confirmed. Through the reinforced viewport, I see our prey limping through the storm like a wounded animal. Kroger's bounty was once a proud merchant vessel, its hull painted in the traditional blue and gold of the Tertius trade guilds. Now it drifts in the warp with gaping wounds torn in its superstructure. Emergency lights flickering in patterns that suggest either critical system failures or something far worse, SOS signals being transmitted in languages that shouldn't exist. The merchant ship's Geller field flickers like a dying candle, its protective barrier wavering between translucent stability and complete collapse. Each fluctuation allows tendrils of raw warp energy to lash against the hull, and I can see the metal itself beginning to warp and twist into configurations that hurt to observe. Worse, there are lights moving inside the ship. Not the steady illumination of functioning lumens, but the dancing, predatory glow of entities that feast on human terror. Our boarding preparations begin immediately. 20 Sisters of Silence, 10 Battle Sisters from the Order of the Bloody Rose, and a support team of naval armsmen prepare to board a vessel that has become a floating nightmare. The boarding torpedo's machine spirits receive final blessings from tech adept Corpheus, their ancient systems reinforced with additional null field generators to help contain whatever psychic horrors we might encounter. But as we approach the merchant vessel, something unprecedented happens. My null aura, usually a constant 15-meter sphere of psychic negation, suddenly expands. The change is subtle at first, a slight increase in the range at which nearby Psykers experience discomfort. Then it doubles, then triples, until I'm projecting a null zone nearly 50 meters in diameter. Sister Mordiana stares at me with undisguised alarm, her own null presence fluctuating in response to whatever is happening to mine. Around us, the Battle Sisters' psychically attuned equipment begins registering impossible readings. Bolt rounds blessed against demon manifestations start glowing with their own inner light, and the sacred oils anointing our weapons begin smoking as if heated by invisible flame. The explanation comes through the ship's Vox system in Navigator Quintus's strained voice. All units be advised. The target vessel is broadcasting psychic emanations on frequencies I've never encountered. It's like a beacon calling to every warp entity in the sector, and something is answering. Through the viewport, shapes begin materializing around Kroger's bounty, not the chaotic, ever-shifting forms of lesser demons, but the precise geometric manifestations of entities that have learned to navigate reality's architecture with surgical precision. They circle the merchant vessel like predatory birds, each one roughly the size of a Thunderhawk gunship, their crystalline bodies refracting the warp's impossible colors into patterns that make my vision blur. Our boarding torpedo launches with a prayer-sealed thump, its blessed hull cutting through the immaterium toward the merchant vessel's primary docking bay. Inside the cramped crew compartment, 29 souls prepare to board a ship where the boundary between reality and nightmare has collapsed entirely. The naval armsmen clutch their lasguns with white-knuckled grips, while the Battle Sisters chant hymns of hatred that harmonize with the torpedo's engine hymnal. But it's the silence from my sisters that speaks loudest. We have no words for what we're about to face, no prayers to offer for protection against threats that exist beyond the realm of spoken language. Our null presence is our shield and our weapon, but in the warp, even that blessing can become a curse. The torpedo's auspex detects the merchant vessel's hull composition, standard Imperial construction, reinforced against micrometeorite impacts and void exposure, but not designed to contain the kind of reality distortions we're reading. The metal itself has begun to exhibit properties that violate basic physics. Sections that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, corridors that extend infinitely in both directions, chambers where gravity flows upward and time moves in reverse. 30 seconds to impact. Through the torpedo's external pict feeds, I see figures moving through Kroger's Bounty's broken viewports, human shapes that move with the wrong number of joints, their shadows falling in directions that suggest light sources existing in impossible locations. Some appear to be crew members still attempting to perform their duties, but their movements are too precise, too coordinated, as if they're being operated by something that has studied human behavior but never truly understood it. 20 seconds. Sister Valdris makes final equipment checks, her experienced hands ensuring that every weapon, every piece of blessed gear, every null field generator is functioning at optimal parameters. She's survived 43 boarding actions against warp-compromised vessels, and her scars tell the story of encounters with entities that view human flesh as construction material for artistic expression. 10 seconds. I feel the familiar weight of my executioner's sword across my shoulders, its blessed steel humming with anticipation. 47 Psykers have died beneath its edge, and today it will taste more witch blood. But as we approach the merchant vessel's hull, a terrible realization settles over me like a burial shroud. This time, we might not be the hunters. Impact. The boarding torpedo tears through Kroger's Bounty's hull with a sound like screaming metal, its melter charges burning through bulkheads that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Emergency klaxons wail as atmosphere rushes out through the breach, but the escaping air carries sounds that make my flesh crawl. Not the hiss of decompression, but whispered voices speaking in languages that predate human speech. We pour through the breach into what should be the merchant vessel's primary cargo hold. Instead, we find ourselves in a corridor that extends impossibly in both directions, its walls lined with doors that open onto rooms containing other versions of the same corridor. The geometry hurts to perceive, angles that fold back on themselves in ways that suggest the ship's interior has become a maze designed by minds that view Euclidean space as a quaint limitation. Sister Valdris signals combat formation, but our usual tactics feel inadequate against an environment where north and south have become suggestions rather than absolute directions. My null aura provides some stability. Within its 50-meter radius, the worst reality distortions fade to mere architectural impossibilities. Beyond that protective sphere, the ship's interior writhes like living tissue, walls breathing and floors pulsing with organic rhythms. We find the first survivors huddled in what was once a storage compartment, now transformed into a spherical chamber where gravity pulls toward the center from all directions. 7 crew members float in the chamber's core, their bodies suspended by cargo netting that someone has jury-rigged into a makeshift shelter. They wear the brown utility jumpsuits of merchant marine ratings, but their eyes hold the 1,000-meter stare of soldiers who've witnessed the unthinkable. One of them, a woman whose name tag reads Quartermaster Chen, speaks in a voice barely above a whisper. "Sisters, thank the Emperor. We thought we were all dead. The passengers, the children. They started changing 3 days ago. Their eyes began bleeding light." Her words trigger flashbacks from my earliest hunts, the particular horror of witnessing psyker manifestation in the young and innocent. Children make the worst witches because their untrained minds have no defense against the entities that view psychic awakening as an open invitation. I've seen 8-year-olds tear holes in reality with temper tantrums, their innocent fury channeled through warp conduits that bring demons screaming into real space. Chen continues. The captain tried to maintain discipline, established quarantine protocols, but they weren't sick, sister. They were changing, becoming something else, something that remembered being human, but couldn't quite manage it anymore. Sister Mordiana signals for detailed casualty reports, her battle cant requesting specifics that will help us understand the scope of contamination. Chen's response makes my blood freeze. 312 souls aboard at departure, but current headcount is impossible to determine because some passengers now exist in multiple locations simultaneously, while others have merged into collective entities that speak with several voices at once. Where are they now? I mouth silently, knowing Chen can read my lips despite our vows of silence. She points toward the ship's stern sections, her hand shaking. Deck 7, the passenger quarters, but sister, the geography doesn't work anymore. Corridors lead to rooms that should be on different levels. And the children are still screaming, but the screaming comes from everywhere at once. We leave the survivors with 2 battle sisters and a squad of naval armsmen, their orders simple. Maintain defensive positions and grant the Emperor's mercy to anyone showing signs of warp corruption. It's a brutal calculus, but necessary. In situations like this, mercy often wears the face of a bolt round to the brain. The journey to Deck 7 takes us through sections of the ship that exist in defiance of basic physics. We encounter corridors where the floor and ceiling have switched places, forcing us to walk on surfaces that were never designed to bear human weight. In the crew quarters, we find personal effects floating in mid-air, suspended by localized gravity fields that pulse in rhythm with something's heartbeat, something large enough that its cardiac cycle affects the entire ship. But it's in the converted storage bay that we discover the true scope of the horror. Someone, or something, has transformed the compartment into a makeshift nursery, complete with sleeping alcoves, play areas, and educational terminals. The walls bear cheerful murals depicting Imperial saints watching over happy children, but the paint weeps tears of blood that pool on the floor in patterns that suggest ritual significance. And there, in the center of the nursery, sits a little girl who cannot be more than 10 years old. Her hair is the white blonde common among void-born children, and she wears a simple blue dress that might once have been pretty before the bloodstains. But her eyes burn with inner fire that cycles through colors that don't exist in normal spectrum. When she sees us, she smiles with genuine delight, and reality bends around her happiness like heated metal. "Are you here to play?" she asks in a voice that harmonizes with itself, each word spoken in multiple octaves simultaneously. The other adults went away, but I made new friends to keep me company. She gestures toward the nursery's corners, and I see them. Twisted amalgamations of flesh and machinery that might once have been human passengers, their bodies reconfigured into shapes that serve as living toys for a child whose psychic abilities are rewriting the fundamental laws of existence. They move when she looks at them, dance when she claps her hands, and sing lullabies in voices that were never meant for music. Sister Valdris raises her bolt pistol, but I place a restraining hand on her weapon. Something about this situation triggers every instinct I've developed over years of hunting the witch cursed. This child is not a victim of warp corruption. She's the source of it, a psyker so powerful that her very presence is transforming the ship into an extension of her will. But she's still just a little girl, alone and frightened in a universe that has labeled her existence a heresy punishable by death. My executioner's sword feels impossibly heavy across my shoulders. Protocol demands her immediate execution. The Emperor's justice is absolute. But the tears streaming down her cheeks are entirely human. The little girl's tears shimmer as they fall, each droplet hanging in the air like suspended diamonds before transforming into tiny butterflies that flutter around the nursery on wings of pure light. Her psychic emanations wash over us in waves of impossible colours, but within my expanded null aura, the effect diminishes to mere visual distortion. She doesn't understand why her new toys have stopped dancing when we entered the room. "Why are you so quiet?" she asks, tilting her head with the innocent curiosity that makes my chest tighten. "The ship people used to talk all the time, but then they got scared of the pretty lights and the singing walls, so I made them better. Would you like me to make you better too?" Sister Valdris's bolt pistol remains steady, her targeting reticle locked on the child's centre mass. One blessed round would end this nightmare, grant the girl the Emperor's mercy before her powers tear further holes in reality's fabric. But I signal for her to hold position. Something about this manifestation doesn't follow the usual patterns of warp corruption. The child shows no signs of demonic influence, no whispered voices from beyond the veil, no physical mutations that mark the touch of chaos. She's simply a human child whose psychic abilities have awakened without training, guidance, or control. Through the nursery's viewports, I see the warp storm intensifying. The crystalline entities circling Kroger's bounty have drawn closer, their geometric forms pulsing in rhythm with the girl's emotional state. Each time she experiences fear or loneliness, they contract their orbital pattern. When she smiles or laughs, they expand outward like predatory flowers opening to catch sunlight. "My name is Lila," she continues, apparently untroubled by our armed presence. "I was going to Mordian Prime to live with my auntie because Mama and Papa went to be with the Emperor. The captain said it would be an adventure, but then the bad dreams started, and everyone began acting strange." Her words trigger memory echoes from my own childhood, before the sisterhood claimed me, before my nullborn nature was discovered and cultivated into a weapon against the witch. I remember nightmares that felt more real than waking hours, dreams where monsters with too many teeth whispered promises of power and belonging. The difference between Lila and myself is a genetic lottery. She was born to channel the warp's energy, while I was born to negate it. "The walls started singing," Lila explains, gesturing towards surfaces that now pulse with organic rhythms. Pretty songs about places where children never have to be alone, where everyone understands the pictures in your head, but the adults got frightened and tried to lock me away, so I had to make them understand. She points to one of the flesh amalgamations in the corner, its multiple faces wearing expressions of blissful serenity despite their anatomically impossible arrangements. "That's Quartermaster Rodriguez. He was mean to me at first, but now he tells the most wonderful stories about sailing between the stars. And that's Passenger Krensky. She knows songs from old Earth that taste like chocolate when she sings them." The reality of what we're witnessing settles over me like ice water. This child hasn't been corrupted by chaos entities. She's unconsciously using her psychic abilities to transform the people around her into idealized companions, reshaping their flesh and minds to create the family she's lost. In her innocent perception, she's helping them, making them better, giving them the happiness she craves for herself. But the end result is still an abomination that violates every law of nature and decency. Sister Mordiana moves to flank the child, her executioner's sword partially drawn. The sound of blessed steel sliding against its scabbard causes Lila to look up with sudden alarm, her burning eyes widening as she realizes we're not here to play games or tell stories. "You're here to hurt me," she whispers, and the temperature in the nursery drops 20 degrees in an instant. Just like the others, they said I was bad, that I made terrible things happen, that the Emperor doesn't love little girls who dream in colors that don't have names. The warp entities surrounding the ship begin to pulse more rapidly, their crystalline forms resonating with frequencies that make my bones ache. Through the hull's metal, I hear sounds like cosmic wind chimes mixed with the screaming of newborn stars. They're not here to consume the child's psychic emanations. They're here to protect her, drawn by her innocence and power like guardian angels made of living mathematics. I don't want to be alone anymore, Lila continues, tears streaming down her cheeks as her emotional state destabilizes further. Everyone always leaves. Everyone always says I'm wrong or bad or scary. But I can make friends who never leave, who understand the music in my head, who don't get frightened when reality bends around my dreams. The ship shudders as her distress intensifies. Bulkheads groan under stresses that shouldn't exist, and the artificial gravity fluctuates wildly between crushing weight and weightless drift. The flesh toys in the corners begin to move more erratically, their borrowed voices harmonizing in a lullaby that sounds like screaming played backwards. Sister Valdris's battle cant conveys urgent tactical assessment, psychic resonance cascade building, hull integrity failing, demon manifestation imminent, immediate termination required. But as I look into Lila's eyes, still recognizably human despite the warp fire burning behind them, I see something that gives me pause. Not the cunning intelligence of a demon-touched witch, not the hollow emptiness of a soul claimed by the ruinous powers, but the desperate longing of a child who simply wants someone to love her without fear. My hand finds the grip of my executioner's sword, its blessed weight familiar and comforting. 47 Psykers have died beneath its edge, each death a mercy granted to souls too dangerous to live. The blade thirsts for the 48th, but this time, for the first time in my career as a witch hunter, I hesitate. And in that moment of hesitation, something in the warp takes notice of our presence. Something ancient, patient, and infinitely hungry. The presence that takes notice of us doesn't announce itself with the usual dramatics of demon manifestation. No sulphurous smoke, no reality-tearing claws, no voices speaking in tongues that predate human language. Instead, it arrives like a whisper in the back of my mind, a gentle suggestion that perhaps mercy and duty need not be mutually exclusive. The thought feels alien, not because it's inhuman, but because it's more human than any thought I've entertained since taking my vows. Leela senses the change immediately, her burning eyes widening as she looks past us towards something invisible. "Oh," she breathes, her voice carrying harmonics of recognition and relief. "You found me. I was so scared you wouldn't come." The temperature in the nursery rises gradually, not the sudden heat of warp manifestation, but the gentle warmth of a hearth fire. The walls stop their organic pulsing and settle into architectural stability, though they retain their unusual curves and impossible angles. Even the flesh amalgamations in the corners seem to relax, their multiple faces wearing expressions of peaceful contentment rather than tortured bliss. Sister Valdris signals immediate retreat, her battle cant conveying what my own instincts scream: greater entity present, psychic contamination spreading, withdrawal to minimum safe distance required. But I find myself reluctant to leave. The presence doesn't feel malevolent. Quite the opposite. It radiates the kind of protective warmth I remember from childhood, before the sisterhood taught me that such emotions were weakness to be excised from the soul. More disturbing than any demon's threats, this entity offers something far more dangerous: hope. "Who are you talking to?" Sister Mordiana signs, her own psychic null barely containing the growing wrongness in the air. Lila giggles, the sound like silver bells chiming in harmony with cosmic radiation. "The nice lady who's been watching over me since Mama and Papa went away. She says she understands what it's like to be different, to have gifts that frighten people. She says there's a place where children like me can learn to use our abilities properly, where no one gets hurt and everyone is happy forever and ever. The nice lady." Every instinct I've developed screams warnings about entities that present themselves as benevolent protectors, especially to psychically gifted children. The greatest servants of the ruinous powers aren't the obvious monsters with claws and fangs. They're the patient tempters who offer exactly what their victims need most, who make corruption feel like salvation. But as Lila speaks, I notice something that chills my blood more than any demon manifestation. My null aura is contracting. The protective void that negates psychic phenomena for 50 meters in all directions is shrinking back toward its normal 15-meter radius, not through external pressure, but through my own unconscious will. Part of me, a part I thought had been burned out during my conditioning, wants to hear what this nice lady has to say. The ship's Vox system crackles to life, but instead of Navigator Quintus's voice, we hear something far more disturbing. Captain Kroger himself, speaking in measured tones that suggest he's reading from prepared text. "Attention boarding party." His voice carries the hollow quality of a man speaking under external influence. "I regret that circumstances have forced this unconventional welcome. Please understand that none of my crew chose their current situation willingly. We are guests in a realm where conventional morality becomes somewhat fluid." Sister Valdris attempts to respond, but her Vox unit produces only static. The ship's communication systems have been compromised, turned into a one-way broadcast system for whatever entity has claimed the vessel. Captain Kroger continues. "The child you've encountered is not the monster your training would label her. She is special, gifted with abilities that could reshape the Imperium's understanding of human potential. The passengers and crew who have been modified volunteered for their current state once they understood the beauty of what she represents. Through the nursery's viewports, I watch the crystalline entities orbiting our position. They've arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern, their forms pulsing in synchronized rhythms that suggest they're serving as psychic resonance amplifiers. Whatever conversation is taking place, it involves more than just the presence aboard Kruger's bounty. You hunt witches, Sisters of Silence, because you've been taught that psychic ability leads inevitably to corruption and damnation. But what if that's simply Imperial propaganda designed to waste humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage? What if children like Lila represent the next step in human development, and your crusade against them is actually genocide disguised as righteousness? The words hit harder than any physical blow because they echo doubts I've carried for years but never allowed myself to articulate. How many children have died beneath my sword? Not monsters, not demon-touched horrors, but simply individuals born with abilities their society labeled heretical. How many families have I destroyed in the name of protecting humanity from itself? Lila approaches slowly, her small hand extended in a gesture of friendship. The nice lady says you don't have to be lonely anymore either. She says your gift, the quiet space around you, could be even more beautiful if you chose to use it differently. Instead of making the music stop, you could conduct it, guide it, help it become something wonderful instead of destructive. Her fingers are inches from mine when Sister Valdris's bolt round takes her center mass. The blessed ammunition, inscribed with nullification wards and prayers of banishment, punches through the child's torso with surgical precision. For a moment that stretches toward eternity, Lila looks down at the spreading crimson stain across her blue dress with an expression of genuine puzzlement, as if trying to understand why someone would hurt her when she was only trying to help. Then she falls, and the universe screams. The warp entities surrounding the ship don't simply vanish. They explode inward, their crystalline forms shattering into fragments that tear through normal space like cosmic shrapnel. The nursery's walls buckle as reality reasserts itself with violent force, impossible angles snapping back to orthodox geometry with sounds like breaking bones. And in the moment of Lila's death, I feel something vast and ancient turn its attention toward us with focused malevolence. We've just declared war on something that views human civilization as an interesting experiment in applied cruelty. The death scream that tears through the warp isn't Lila's. It's the sound of whatever entity had been using her as an anchor point, suddenly finding itself cut loose from real space. The nursery convulses around us as the presence that called itself the Nice Lady reveals its true nature, not a benevolent protector, but something ancient and patient that had been preparing to use the child as a doorway into our reality. The flesh amalgamations in the corners collapse like marionettes with severed strings, their borrowed consciousness returning to whatever remains of their original minds. Most don't survive the transition. The human psyche isn't designed to remember existing as living toys shaped by a child's unconscious will. Those who do retain awareness begin screaming immediately, their voices harmonizing in a chorus of madness that makes the ship's hull ring like a struck bell. Sister Valdris reloads with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise despite the reality storm raging around us. She's made the hard choice that duty demanded, the decision I couldn't bring myself to make. The child's death was necessary, merciful even, but the hollow feeling in my chest suggests something fundamental has changed in how I view our sacred mission. The ship's artificial gravity fails completely, sending loose debris floating through corridors that are reshaping themselves back to normal dimensions. Emergency lighting flickers in patterns that suggest the vessel's machine spirits are struggling to process what they've witnessed. In the distance, I hear the distinctive whine of hull breaches, not from external damage, but from internal stresses caused by reality snapping back into orthodox geometry. Captain Kroger's voice returns through the Vox system, but now it carries the raw terror of a man whose mind has been suddenly freed from external influence. All hands to emergency stations. Hull breach in sectors 7 through 12. Life support failing. Oh, Emperor, preserve us. What have we done? What have we become? Sister Mordiana signals for immediate extraction, her battle cant conveying tactical assessment. Primary threat neutralized, secondary contamination spreading, civilian casualties mounting, recommend immediate evacuation. But as we move through the ship's transforming corridors, I realize our problems have only begun. The entity that had been using Lila as an anchor hadn't simply been protecting her. It had been preparing to manifest through her, using her innocent trust as a conduit for something that viewed human suffering as the finest form of artistic expression. Now, denied its primary vessel, it's searching for alternatives. The surviving crew members we encounter show varying degrees of psychic scarring. Some retain enough coherence to follow evacuation protocols, stumbling through emergency procedures with the mechanical precision of deep shock. Others have been damaged by proximity to powers beyond human comprehension, their minds leaving them responsive but hollow, as if essential parts of their personality have been surgically removed. In the crew quarters, we find Quartermaster Chen exactly where we left her. But she's no longer the same person who begged for rescue hours ago. Her eyes hold depths that shouldn't exist in human vision, and when she speaks, her voice carries harmonics that suggest multiple consciousness occupying the same vocal cords. "Sisters," she says, but the greeting feels wrong, too formal, as if something is wearing her personality like an ill-fitting mask. The child's death was unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected. There are always multiple paths to the same destination, and patience is a virtue we've cultivated across millennia. Sister Valdris raises her bolt pistol, but Chen raises her hands in a gesture that's simultaneously surrender and benediction. No need for additional violence. This vessel serves its purpose merely by existing, a testament to what happens when the Imperium's ignorance encounters forces it cannot comprehend or control. Every death here sends ripples through the warp. Every scream of terror feeds entities that view your crusade against psychic development as delightful entertainment. The implications of her words settle over me like ice. We haven't stopped a demon manifestation, we've participated in it. The entity that called itself the Nice Lady never intended to protect Lila. It had been manipulating events to ensure maximum trauma, maximum suffering, maximum psychic resonance that would serve as a beacon for even worse things lurking in the warp's depths. The child believed she was saving people, Chen continues, her borrowed voice carrying alien inflections. But her transformations were just the opening movement in a symphony of corruption that spans sectors. Every unsanctioned psyker you execute, every family you destroy in the name of protecting humanity, it all feeds the very entities you claim to oppose. Through the ship's hull, I hear sounds that shouldn't be possible in the vacuum of space. Howling winds that carry voices speaking in languages that predate human civilization. The warp storm surrounding Kroger's bounty isn't dissipating with Lila's death. It's intensifying, drawing more entities to feed on the psychic emanations of mass trauma and betrayed innocence. Sister Valdris's second bolt round takes Chen center mass, but instead of falling, she smiles with genuine warmth and dissolves into smoke that smells of burning sanctity. Her final words echo through the corridors long after her physical form disperses. Thank you for your service, sisters. Every witch you hunt brings our plans closer to fruition. The evacuation becomes a running battle against an enemy we can't see, can't touch, and can barely comprehend. Crew members who seemed perfectly normal suddenly begin manifesting psychic abilities triggered by proximity to our null auras. The ship's machine spirits grow increasingly erratic, equipment failures cascading through systems that should be completely isolated from psychic influence. By the time we reach the boarding torpedo's docking point, only 12 of Kroger's bounty's original crew remain alive and coherent enough for extraction. The rest have either died from psychic feedback, been transformed into something that no longer qualifies as human, or simply vanished into spaces between spaces that exist in the ship's restructured interior. As we prepare for emergency departure, I take one final look at the merchant vessel that has become a floating monument to the Imperium's failures. Every surface bears scars from reality distortions. Every corridor echoes with the whispers of entities that view human suffering as the purest form of worship. We came here to hunt witches and found ourselves participants in a cosmic joke where the hunters have become the hunted, where duty and genocide wear the same uniform, and where the only victory available is measured in degrees of failure. The torpedo's engines ignite, carrying us back toward the nemesis incarnate through a warp storm that pulses with malevolent satisfaction. Behind us, Kroger's bounty begins its final transformation, not into something alien, but into something that remembers being human, just clearly enough to understand what it has lost. The boarding torpedo's hull screams as we transit back through the warp storm, its blessed armor plates buckling under stresses that exist beyond the physical realm. The 12 survivors from Kroger's bounty huddle in the crew compartment's restraint harnesses, their eyes reflecting the hollow 1,000-meter stare of souls who've witnessed their reality rewritten by forces they cannot comprehend. 3 of them weep continuously, tears that shimmer with unnatural iridescence before evaporating into mist that smells of burnt ozone. Sister Valdris monitors our extraction route through the torpedo's tactical display, but the readings make no sense. According to our instruments, we're simultaneously approaching the nemesis incarnate and moving away from it, our velocity calculations showing negative numbers that suggest we're arriving before we departed. The warp storm has transformed local space into a Klein bottle of twisted causality where effect precedes cause and salvation becomes damnation. One of the survivors, a junior engineer whose name tag reads Kozlov, begins speaking in a voice that carries harmonics of barely controlled hysteria. She was just a little girl, just a scared little girl who missed her parents. We could have helped her, taught her control, found specialists who understand psychic manifestation in children. His words trigger the kind of doubt that threatens everything I've built my identity around. How many children like Lila have died beneath my sword over the years? How many could have been saved with proper training, guidance, and care instead of immediate execution? The Imperium's policy toward unsanctioned Psykers allows for no middle ground. They die, or they threaten entire worlds with demon incursion. But what if there's a third option we've never been allowed to consider? Silence, Sister Mordiana signs harshly, her battle cant conveying tactical necessity. Civilian morale compromised. Warp entity influence probable. Recommend immediate psychic screening. But her assessment doesn't address the underlying problem. The entity that used Lila as a focal point hadn't simply been manipulating the child. It had been manipulating us, orchestrating events to ensure maximum psychological impact on everyone involved. Every doubt I'm experiencing, every question about the righteousness of our mission could be part of its design. The torpedo shudders as something massive passes nearby. Not a physical object, but a concentration of malevolent attention that makes reality hiccup around us. Through the vessel's armored viewports, I see shapes moving through the warp storm that defy description. Geometric impossibilities that exist in more dimensions than human perception can process. Their surfaces reflecting scenes from battles that haven't been fought yet or were lost in futures that will never come to pass. Navigator Quintus's voice crackles through the Vox system, his psychic sight strained beyond normal limits. Boarding party, be advised. We're tracking multiple entities converging on your position. They're not trying to attack. They're trying to communicate. Something about a message they want delivered to Terra. A message to Terra. The implications make my blood freeze. Whatever we encountered aboard Kroger's Bounty wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of something larger, a coordinated effort that spans the galaxy and targets the very heart of Imperial power. The entity that called itself the Nice Lady had been playing a game where individual moves are measured in centuries and victory conditions exist beyond human comprehension. One of the survivors suddenly begins convulsing in his restraint harness, his back arching as foam flecked with silver light spills from his mouth. But instead of the usual signs of psychic manifestation, he exhibits something far more disturbing: perfect clarity. His eyes focus with laser precision on Sister Valdris, and when he speaks, his voice carries the measured cadence of someone reading from prepared text. Sister Superior Valdris of the Silent Sisterhood, designation Theta 7 Alpha, 43 confirmed witch kills, veteran of the Mordian compliance and the harrowing of Cyclopia Prime. The words flow with inhuman accuracy, reciting details that should be classified at the highest levels. You executed the child because duty demanded it, but part of you died with her. Part of you recognized the fundamental injustice of a system that labels children as heretics for accidents of birth. Valdris's bolt pistol clears its holster with practiced speed, but the possessed survivor raises his hand in a gesture of peace. No violence necessary. This message is for you specifically, chosen for delivery because your psychological profile indicates maximum receptivity to cognitive dissonance regarding your mission parameters. The torpedo's emergency lighting flickers as whatever entity is using the man's vocal cords pushes his consciousness aside completely. When he continues speaking, it's with the authority of something that views human history as a book it helped write. The child Leela was the 732nd psychically gifted youth terminated by your hand or direct order. Each death has been recorded, catalogued, and added to a growing collection of evidence that the Imperium's current policies regarding psychic development represent genocide disguised as necessity. Sister Mordiana moves to terminate the possessed survivor, but I signal for restraint. Whatever this thing is, it's providing intelligence about threats we've never been briefed on, patterns that suggest our individual hunt missions are part of a larger tapestry of manipulation. Your Emperor sits upon his golden throne, sustained by the psychic energy of 1,000 souls sacrificed daily. Yet his servants hunt and kill the very individuals whose abilities could reduce that terrible toll. The irony is exquisite. Humanity's greatest psychic achievement powered by the systematic extermination of psychic potential. The words carry implications that make my worldview crumble at its foundations. If psychically gifted individuals could be trained rather than executed, if their abilities could be channeled towards sustaining the Emperor rather than feeding him fresh souls every day. But that kind of thinking leads down paths that end in heresy and damnation. The message for Terra is simple, the entity continues through its borrowed voice. Every witch hunter who questions their mission, every sister of silence who hesitates before the killing blow, every moment of doubt about the righteousness of genocide, it all serves our purposes. Corruption doesn't require demon manifestation or chaos worship. Sometimes it only requires asking the right questions at the right moment. The possessed survivor's body begins to smoke, his nervous system overloading under the strain of channeling communication across impossible distances. But before his consciousness burns out completely, the entity delivers its final message. Sister Kaelen, the null-born daughter who dreams of voices she cannot hear, your expanded aura aboard the merchant vessel wasn't an accident. Your abilities are evolving, adapting to threats that exist beyond current Imperial comprehension. When the time comes to choose between duty and truth, remember that some orders are designed to be disobeyed. Then he dies, his body crumbling to ash that swirls through the torpedo's recycled atmosphere before dissolving into nothingness. In the terrible silence that follows, I realize we're no longer approaching the Nemesis incarnate. According to our instruments, we're heading deeper into the warp storm, toward coordinates that don't exist on any star chart, carrying passengers who may no longer be entirely human. And somewhere in the cosmic distance, something vast and patient continues weaving plans that span millennia. The torpedo's cogitator arrays scream binary litanies of error as our navigation systems struggle to process impossible readings. We're simultaneously stationary and moving at faster-than-light velocities, our position triangulated as existing in 17 different locations throughout the galaxy. The machine spirits that guide our blessed vessel cry out in electronic anguish, their artificial consciousness unable to reconcile the contradictory data flooding their logic circuits. Sister Valdris attempts manual override of our guidance systems, her scarred hands dancing across control interfaces that respond with increasing reluctance. Each command input generates responses that suggest the torpedo's machine spirit is being influenced by external forces, not corrupted in the traditional sense, but convinced that following our orders would somehow violate its core programming directives. The remaining survivors have fallen silent, their faces bearing expressions of hollow acceptance that I've seen before in the eyes of those who've gazed too deeply into the warp's chaotic depths. But unlike typical psychic scarring, they retain full cognitive function. They simply no longer care about survival, escape, or any of the motivations that normally drive human behavior in crisis situations. Through the torpedo's armored viewports, the warp storm surrounding us begins to take on recognizable patterns. What initially appeared to be random cosmic turbulence reveals itself as carefully orchestrated theater. Each swirl of impossible color and reality distortion serving as backdrop for a performance that spans galactic distances. We're not trapped in the storm. We're being guided through it, led toward a destination that exists beyond the boundaries of normal space-time. Navigator Quintus's voice returns through increasingly degraded Vox transmission. Boarding party, losing coherent contact. The warp currents around your position are intentional. Someone or something is using the storm as camouflage for a meeting. His words cut off in a burst of static that resolves into whispered voices speaking in High Gothic, but the pronunciation carries inflections that suggest the speakers learned the language from ancient texts rather than living instruction. When the transmission clears, it's no longer Quintus speaking through our comm system. Sisters of Silence, the voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to commanding legions across cosmic distances. Your reputation precedes you. Witch hunters without equal, null-born daughters whose very existence negates the gifts you've sworn to destroy. How perfectly symmetrical that you should be the ones chosen for this revelation. I signal Sister Valdris to maintain comm silence, but the entity speaking through our systems continues as if responding to unspoken questions. No need for operational security protocols. We know everything about your mission parameters, your psychological profiles, your individual kill counts, and the specific doubts that gnaw at each of your supposedly pure souls. The torpedo's internal lighting shifts from standard illumination to something that exists beyond normal spectrum, not darker or brighter, but somehow more real than reality should permit. Within this enhanced visibility, I notice details about my sisters that escaped previous observation. Micro-expressions of doubt, stress fractures in their absolute faith, and the subtle ways their null auras fluctuate when confronted with evidence that contradicts their training. "Sister Kaelen!" The voice addresses me directly, and I feel cosmic attention focus on my position with surgical precision. Your null field expanded to 50 meters aboard the merchant vessel, an evolution that shouldn't be possible according to current Imperial understanding of psychic negation. Would you like to understand why your abilities are changing? The question triggers memories I've spent years trying to suppress. Childhood dreams where I could hear voices calling from impossible distances, moments during combat when I sensed psychic phenomena before they manifested, and the growing suspicion that my null nature isn't as absolute as my training suggests. One of the survivors, a woman whose merchant marine uniform bears the rank insignia of a senior navigator, suddenly speaks in a voice that harmonizes with the entity using our comm system. The Silent Sisterhood was created during the Great Crusade as a weapon against humanity's psychic potential. Your conditioning teaches you to view psychic ability as corruption, but the truth is more complex. You're not hunters of the witch-touched. You're gardeners, pruning humanity's psychic development according to specifications established 10,000 years ago. Sister Mordiana's executioner's sword clears its scabbard with blessed steel singing against sanctified leather. But before she can strike, the possessed navigator raises her hand and the weapon's blade stops centimeters from her throat, not held by telekinetic force, but by my own unconscious command. My null aura has somehow extended to encompass the blade, negating whatever blessing allows it to cut through warp-touched flesh. Fascinating. Both voices speak in perfect unison. Your abilities respond to emotional stimuli rather than conscious command. The more you question your mission's righteousness, the more your null nature adapts to protect rather than destroy. It's almost as if your psychic negation was designed with built-in safeguards against absolute obedience. The torpedo suddenly lurches as we transition from warp space into something that exists adjacent to normal reality, a pocket dimension where the laws of physics operate according to negotiated treaties rather than absolute constants. Through the viewports, I see a structure that defies description. Part cathedral, part laboratory, part fortress, its architecture incorporating design elements from civilizations that predate humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Welcome to the observatory. The voices continue as our vessel is guided into a docking bay whose dimensions exist in more directions than human perception can process. Here, representatives from various species and epochs gather to discuss matters of mutual interest. Today's topic, the systematic extermination of psychic potential across multiple galactic civilizations, and the entities that benefit from such policies. The docking clamps engage with our torpedo's hull, their mechanical precision suggesting technology that makes Imperial engineering look primitive by comparison. But it's not alien construction. It's human, built according to principles that the Imperium's knowledge base claims are impossible to achieve. Sister Valdris signals for emergency extraction, her battle cant conveying what we all understand. Primary mission compromised. Unknown entities demonstrating superior capabilities. Recommend immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance. But as the torpedo's boarding ramp extends into the observatory's receiving chamber, I realize withdrawal is no longer an option. Whatever summoned us here has been planning this encounter for far longer than our individual lifespans, and the questions it wants to ask are ones that will reshape everything we understand about our purpose in the Emperor's service. The survivors file out of our vessel with expressions of resigned curiosity, their minds apparently freed from whatever influence kept them catatonic during our journey. They move like people waking from troubling dreams, their awareness returning gradually as they step into an environment designed to accommodate human consciousness without the usual reality distortions that accompany warp space encounters. And waiting in the chamber to greet us stands a figure that makes my null aura contract involuntarily, not from fear, but from recognition of something that should not exist. An Astartes in power armor bearing the heraldry of the 1,000 Suns, but without the mutations and warp corruption that should mark any survivor of that damned legion. He removes his helmet, revealing features that are undeniably human, unscarred by chaos influence, and bearing an expression of profound sadness mixed with hope. "Sisters," he says in a voice that carries the weight of 10,000 years. "We need to talk." The 1,000 Suns. Astartes stands motionless as my expanded null aura washes over him, his ceramite armor's psychic conduits flickering but not failing as they should when exposed to our presence. By all logic, he should be writhing in agony. Post-heresy Marines of his legion exist as walking amalgamations of flesh and warp energy, their physical forms held together by chaos sorcery that my null nature should unravel like wet paper. Instead, he regards us with the patient sadness of someone who's spent millennia preparing for this exact conversation. "I know what you're thinking," he says, his voice carrying none of the distortion that marks the demon-touched. "Every instinct you've cultivated screams that I'm an abomination requiring immediate termination. Your training demands that you strike first and investigate the ashes afterward. But I ask for one moment of consideration before you act on those imperatives." Sister Valdris's bolt pistol remains steady, its targeting reticle locked on the Astartes' gorget, where blessed ammunition could sever his head from his shoulders. But she doesn't fire, not from hesitation, but because something in his demeanor suggests he's neither threat nor typical heretic. He stands like a man carrying unbearable guilt who's finally found someone qualified to hear his confession. "My name was Captain Sister Kaelen of the 1,000 Suns' 9th Fellowship," he continues, each word measured and precise. "I served with distinction during the Great Crusade until the Council of Nicaea branded my legion's pursuit of knowledge as heresy. I watched my brothers transform into mindless automata when the flesh change consumed them. I witnessed Magnus make his terrible bargain to save what remained of our souls. The observatory's chamber around us pulses with subdued lighting that doesn't hurt to perceive, a marked contrast to the reality-warping illumination common in warp-touched environments. The architecture blends Imperial design principles with innovations that suggest technological advancement rather than chaos corruption. Everything about this place screams impossibility, yet my null aura detects no warp contamination, no demonic influence, no psychic manifestations that would typically mark heretical construction. But unlike my brothers, I didn't embrace the ruinous powers when Prospero burned, Kaelen explains, his scarred features bearing expressions of ancient regret. Instead, I chose exile. 10,000 years of wandering the galaxy's edges, studying the entities that feed on humanity's fear of its own psychic potential, learning the true scope of the manipulation that shapes Imperial policy. Sister Mordiana signals tactical assessment. Unknown Astartes demonstrating non-hostile behavior. Claims of Thousand Sons heritage unconfirmed. Psychic corruption readings negative. Recommend cautious interrogation. But her professional evaluation doesn't address the fundamental impossibility of what we're witnessing. Post-heresy. Thousand Sons don't exist as stable entities. They're either dust animated by sorcery, demon-possessed husks, or monsters so consumed by chaos that they barely qualify as formally human. Yet this Marine shows none of those characteristics while claiming membership in a legion that shouldn't have any untainted survivors. The entity you encountered aboard Kroger's Bounty, the presence that called itself the Nice Lady, is part of a consortium that's existed since before the Emperor's rise to power, Kaelen continues. They don't serve the traditional chaos gods because they don't need to. Instead, they feed on the psychic emanations generated by systematic oppression, fear, and the wholesale slaughter of innocents labeled as threats to public safety. His words carry implications that make my worldview fracture along fault lines I didn't know existed. If entities can sustain themselves on the psychic energy generated by the Imperium's witch-hunting policies, then our sacred mission might be serving the very forces we're sworn to oppose. Every unsanctioned psyker you execute, every family destroyed by Inquisition purges, every child killed for the crime of being born different, it all generates the precise type of psychic resonance these entities require for sustenance. He explains with the clinical detachment of someone who's studied horror until it becomes academic exercise. They don't need to corrupt Imperial policy because Imperial policy already serves their purposes perfectly. One of the merchant vessel survivors, a junior engineer who's been silent since our extraction, suddenly speaks with his own voice, not possessed, but carrying the weight of terrible understanding. That's why they let us survive. We're witnesses, carriers of a story that will spread through Imperial networks and generate exactly the kind of doubt and confusion they feed on. They don't want to destroy the Imperium. They want to refine it into a more efficient suffering generation system. The observatory's chamber begins to fill with additional figures, not demons or heretics, but humans wearing the uniforms and insignia of various Imperial institutions. I recognize the robes of Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests, the armor of Astra Militarum officers, even the ceremonial garb of high-ranking ecclesiarchy clergy. All bear expressions of profound disillusionment mixed with desperate hope. We are the forgotten, Kaelen explains as more individuals enter from passages that seem to exist in directions my eyes can't quite follow. Imperial servants who discovered truths that couldn't be reported through normal channels, who found evidence of manipulation so fundamental that it undermines the basic assumptions upon which our civilization is built. We've spent centuries gathering information, documenting patterns, preparing for the moment when someone with the authority to act on our findings would listen. Sister Valdris's battle cant conveys urgent tactical assessment, multiple unknown contacts, potential trap scenario, recommend immediate extraction protocols. But even as she signals for withdrawal, I find myself compelled to hear more. The questions raised by our encounter with Lila, the manipulation we witnessed aboard Kroger's Bounty, and the growing suspicion that our individual hunt missions are part of something larger all point toward patterns that my training never prepared me to recognize. The child you killed was innocent. A woman wearing the insignia of a Schola Progenium instructor says, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's spent decades training orphans for Imperial service. Her psychic abilities could have been channeled, controlled, turned into tools that served humanity rather than threatened it. But the policies that demand immediate execution ensure maximum trauma, maximum psychic resonance, maximum feeding opportunities for entities that view human suffering as art. Kaelen nods gravely. They've been playing this game for millennia, sisters. Every time the Imperium develops more efficient methods for identifying and eliminating Psykers, these entities provide subtle guidance that makes the process more traumatic, more psychically resonant, more useful for their purposes. They don't want to end your crusade against the witch. They want to perfect it. The implications settle over me like ice water. If our sacred mission has been corrupted from its inception, if the very policies we enforce serve entities we're sworn to oppose, then everything I've built my identity around becomes worse than meaningless. It becomes collaboration with cosmic evil disguised as righteous duty. But before I can fully process the horror of that possibility, alarms begin sounding throughout the observatory. Emergency lighting bathes the chamber in crimson illumination as automatic defense systems activate with mechanical precision. Something has followed us here. Something that doesn't want this conversation to continue. The alarms carry harmonics that make my teeth ache. Not standard klaxons, but frequencies designed to resonate with human nervous systems in ways that trigger primal flight responses. The observatory's emergency lighting shifts through spectrum ranges that shouldn't be visible, each pulse revealing details about our surroundings that disappeared when normal illumination returned. The chamber's architecture writhes between configurations, passages opening and closing according to defensive protocols that treat space itself as malleable construction material. Captain Kaelen's expression hardens as he recognizes whatever threat has triggered the facility's defensive systems. "They've found us faster than anticipated," he says, his voice carrying the grim satisfaction of someone whose worst predictions have proven accurate. The entities that benefit from current Imperial policies don't appreciate academic discussions about their feeding methods. Through the observatory's crystalline viewports, I see shapes moving through the pocket dimension's twisted geography. Not ships or physical constructs, but concentrations of malevolent intelligence that exist as living mathematics given predatory purpose. They approach like thoughts becoming reality, their presence causing reality distortions that make nearby space fold in on itself. Sister Valdris signals immediate combat preparation, her battle cant conveying tactical priorities. Unknown hostiles approaching. Defensive positions required. Civilian protection protocols activated. But as we move to establish firing lines, I realize our standard weapons may prove inadequate against threats that exist primarily as hostile concepts rather than physical targets. The blessed bolt rounds in my pistol are inscribed with wards against demon manifestation and psychic corruption, but these entities seem to operate according to entirely different principles. One of the forgotten, a tech priest whose augmetic replacements bear designs I don't recognize, approaches with urgency written in his mechanical movements. "Sisters, your null auras represent our primary defensive capability against what approaches. These entities feed on psychic emanations, but they cannot directly process the void signature that surrounds your presence." The woman in Schola Progenium robes adds crucial context. However, they can manipulate the psychological states of those around you, amplifying doubt, fear, and guilt until your companions become weapons turned against you. Every question you've entertained about the righteousness of your mission, every moment of hesitation before executing Psyker targets, they'll use those emotions as entry points. Her words trigger immediate understanding of our tactical situation. We're not facing an enemy that can be killed with conventional weapons, but a psychological warfare specialist that treats human consciousness as a battlefield where victories are measured in corrupted souls rather than body counts. The first attack comes not as physical assault, but as memory invasion. Suddenly, I'm reliving every witch hunt I've participated in, but experiencing events from the perspectives of those I've executed. I feel the terror of a 12-year-old girl as my executioner's sword descends. Understand the desperate love of parents trying to hide their psychically gifted children from Imperial authorities. Experience the confusion of elderly citizens whose latent abilities manifested during moments of extreme stress. But my null aura provides unexpected protection against the emotional assault. The same void that negates psychic phenomena also dampens the intensity of forced memory experiences, reducing traumatic flashbacks to manageable levels of psychological discomfort. What should have been crushing guilt becomes merely profound sadness, still painful, but not debilitating. Sister Mordiana isn't as fortunate. Her null field fluctuates wildly as she experiences every kill she's made from the victim's perspective simultaneously. She drops to her knees, her executioner's sword clattering against the observatory's floor as her hands shake with uncontrollable tremors. The void around her contracts to barely 3 meters as her concentration fractures under psychological pressure. "Focus on duty," Sister Valdris signals, her own null presence struggling against memories of the child Lila's final moments. Emotion is weakness. The Emperor's justice transcends individual suffering. But even her disciplined mind shows stress fractures as the attacking entities amplify every doubt she's ever suppressed about our mission. Her bolt pistol wavers between targets that may not exist. Her tactical assessment degraded by psychological warfare that treats certainty itself as enemy territory. Captain Kaelen moves to support our defensive positions, his power armor's systems interfacing with the observatory's defensive networks in ways that suggest extensive preparation for this exact scenario. The entities attacking us are the same ones that orchestrated the events aboard Kroger's Bounty, he explains, while manipulating controls that exist in more dimensions than human hands should be able to operate. They're not trying to kill us. They're trying to corrupt us, turn us into assets that will spread their influence throughout Imperial command structures. The tech priest adds technical clarification, while his augmetic systems interface directly with the facility's machine spirits. Current assault pattern suggests they're testing our psychological resilience, measuring stress fracture points in our individual belief systems. Each successful attack generates data about optimal corruption vectors for future operations. Through the chamber's shifting architecture, I see more of the merchant vessel survivors experiencing their own psychological assaults. But instead of breaking under the pressure, they display remarkable resistance. Not because they're particularly strong-willed, but because they've already witnessed the full scope of the manipulation that shapes Imperial policy. Having seen behind the curtain, they're no longer vulnerable to illusions about the righteousness of their suffering. The attacking entities seem to recognize this resistance pattern because their assault shifts to a different vector. Instead of amplifying guilt about past actions, they begin projecting visions of possible futures. Realities where the Imperium's witch-hunting policies are abandoned, where psychically gifted children receive training instead of execution, where humanity's evolutionary potential isn't systematically culled by policies designed to generate maximum suffering. The visions are beautiful, hopeful, and absolutely terrifying because they feel achievable. I see myself leading reformation efforts that transform the Silent Sisterhood from executioners into teachers. Our null presence used to provide safe training environments for developing Psykers rather than negating their abilities permanently. I witness Imperial policy changes that reduce demon incursions through proper psychic education rather than wholesale slaughter. I observe technological advances that become possible when humanity's psychic potential is cultivated rather than feared. But underlying every beautiful possibility is the subtle suggestion that such changes require abandoning the God Emperor's will, rejecting the sacrifice he made to protect humanity from its own dangerous gifts, and embracing heresies that lead inevitably to chaos corruption. The entities attacking us aren't offering corruption disguised as salvation. They're offering salvation that might actually be corruption, forcing us to choose between loyalty to current Imperial doctrine and loyalty to humanity's potential future evolution. And as I watch Sister Valdris struggle with visions of children she could have saved instead of killed, I realize the most insidious aspect of this psychological assault. It's not entirely wrong. The moment I acknowledge that the entity's visions contain elements of truth, my null aura collapses entirely. The protective void that has defined my existence since childhood simply ceases to function, leaving me vulnerable to psychic phenomena for the first time in decades. The sensation is overwhelming, like suddenly being able to hear colors or taste emotions, my consciousness flooded with sensory input that my brain has no framework for processing. But instead of the expected demon manifestation or warp corruption, I experience something far more disturbing: clarity. Without my null field filtering reality through the lens of psychic negation, I can perceive the observatory's true nature. This isn't a heretical construct built by enemies of the Imperium. It's a research facility created by loyal Imperial servants who discovered patterns too dangerous to report through official channels. The tech priest notices my field collapse immediately, his augmetic sensors registering readings that make him recoil in mechanical alarm. Sister Kaelen's null signature has inverted. She's not projecting psychic negation anymore. She's amplifying psychic clarity within a localized area. Captain Kaon turns from the defensive controls with an expression that mixes hope and terror. That's not supposed to be possible. Null-born individuals don't develop conventional psychic abilities. Their souls exist as voids that cannot be filled with warp energy. But as I extend my awareness through this new sensory mode, I realize he's wrong. My soul isn't a void. It's a lens that focuses psychic phenomena rather than negating them. For decades, my training has forced me to use this ability in reverse, creating areas of psychic absence instead of psychic clarity. The stress of confronting the fundamental contradictions in Imperial policy has somehow triggered a reversion to my ability's natural configuration. Through this enhanced perception, I can see the entities attacking us clearly for the first time. They're not demons or warp predators. They're fragments of collective human consciousness, pieces of species-wide awareness that have been severed from the main gestalt and driven into predatory behavior by millennia of systematic trauma. Every Psyker execution, every family destroyed by witch-hunting policies, every child killed for the crime of being born different has contributed to their formation, their humanity's psychic potential, transformed into monsters by the very policies designed to protect us from them. "My God Emperor," I whisper, the words feeling strange on lips that have been silent for decades. But my voice doesn't carry the rasping quality typical of silent sisters who break their vows. It resonates with harmonics that suggest my vocal cords have been restructured to channel psychic phenomena through spoken language. Sister Valdris stares at me with undisguised horror, her bolt pistol wavering between my position and the approaching entities. According to her training, I've just demonstrated the exact kind of psychic awakening that demands immediate execution. But the confusion in her eyes suggests she's beginning to question whether that training serves humanity or something else entirely. "Sister Kaelen," she manages to sign with trembling hands, "you're exhibiting unprecedented psychic manifestation. Protocol demands I die." I complete her statement, but my voice carries no fear or resignation. Just like Lila should have died. just like every child whose only crime was being born with abilities that could reshape our understanding of human potential. The attacking entities pause in their assault, their predatory mathematics shifting into configurations that suggest recognition rather than hunger. Through my enhanced awareness, I can sense their confusion. They expected to find prey, but instead discovered something that might qualify as distant relatives. One of the merchant vessel survivors, the junior engineer who'd spoken with such clarity earlier, approaches slowly with his hands raised in a gesture of supplication. Sister, what you're experiencing, this clarity, this ability to perceive the truth behind Imperial policies, it's what they've been trying to suppress, not because it's heretical, but because it threatens the system that generates the suffering they feed on. The Schola Progenium instructor adds her own perspective. Every Silent Sister is a potential Psyker whose abilities have been inverted through conditioning and training. Your null presence isn't the absence of psychic power. It's psychic power turned against itself, creating artificial voids where natural clarity should exist. Captain Kaelen's expression shows dawning understanding mixed with tactical assessment. If the Silent Sisterhood could be reconfigured to function as psychic clarity generators rather than null zones, they could provide safe training environments for developing Psykers without the need for wholesale execution. But his words trigger immediate alarm in Sister Valdris, whose loyalty to current doctrine wars with growing evidence that current doctrine serves entities we're sworn to oppose. Her bolt pistol swings toward me with mechanical precision, but her finger hesitates on the trigger as she struggles with contradictions that threaten to shatter her worldview entirely. Heresy, she signs frantically, her battle cant conveying desperate adherence to familiar certainties. Psychic awakening in null-born, unprecedented corruption patterns, immediate termination required. I look into her eyes and see not fanaticism, but terror, the existential fear of someone whose entire identity depends on beliefs that are crumbling under the weight of contradictory evidence. She's not my enemy. She's another victim of manipulation so fundamental that questioning it feels like betraying everything sacred. Valdris, I say gently, using her name instead of rank designation for the first time in our service together. Look around you. Use the tactical assessment skills that have kept you alive through 43 boarding actions. What do you see? Her gaze sweeps the observatory's chamber, cataloguing details with professional precision. Loyal Imperial servants working together to understand threats to humanity. Research facilities dedicated to protecting civilization from manipulation, and survivors of Psyker hunting operations who show no signs of chaos corruption, despite witnessing events that should have driven them insane. I see, she begins, then stops as the implications settle over her like ice water. I see evidence that everything we've been taught might be wrong, I complete her thought. Not evil, not heretical, just wrong. Based on incomplete information, designed by people who didn't understand what they were fighting, refined by entities that benefit from the suffering our policies generate. The entities attacking the observatory begin to withdraw, their predatory mathematics shifting into patterns that suggest disappointment rather than defeat. Through my enhanced perception, I understand their retreat. They can't feed on clarity, only on the confusion and guilt that accompanies suppressed truth. My awakening has transformed their feeding ground into an environment toxic to their existence. But as they fade back into whatever dimensional spaces they inhabit, I sense a final message projected through frequencies only my reconfigured consciousness can perceive. The conversion begins. One sister awakened, thousands yet to follow. The harvest improves with each questioning mind. And in that moment, I realize the true scope of the trap we've walked into. My psychic awakening isn't a victory against the entities that manipulate Imperial policy. It's the next phase of their plan, the beginning of a cascade that will spread doubt and rebellion throughout the Silent Sisterhood, creating the exact kind of chaos and confusion they require for sustained nourishment. We haven't escaped their manipulation. We've become unwitting participants in it. The realization that my awakening serves the entity's purposes rather than opposing them should devastate me. But instead, it brings a strange calm. Standing in the observatory's chamber with my psychic clarity expanding in waves that encompass my sisters, the survivors, and the forgotten, I finally understand the true nature of the trap we've all been living within. They want us to rebel, I say, my voice carrying harmonics that make the chamber's crystalline walls resonate in sympathy. Every doubt we develop about Imperial policy, every moment we hesitate before executing a child, every question we ask about the righteousness of our mission, it all feeds their agenda because they don't want to destroy the witch-hunting system, they want to improve it. Sister Valdris lowers her bolt pistol, her targeting discipline failing as she struggles to process implications that rewrite everything she understands about enemy motivation. "Explain," she signs, her battle cant shaky but still functional. Captain Kaelen provides the tactical assessment our training never prepared us for. A rebellion against Imperial psyker policies would generate massive psychic turbulence, fear, anger, guilt, betrayal, civil war between factions loyal to different interpretations of the Emperor's will. The entities feeding on human suffering would experience a feast that could sustain them for millennia. The tech priests' augmetic systems interface with data streams that display probability cascades across the chamber's walls. Reformation movements spreading through Imperial hierarchies, witch hunter units questioning their orders, entire sectors torn apart by conflicts between those who demand continued purges and those who advocate for psychic training programs. But if we continue following current doctrine, the Scholar Progenium instructor adds with bitter understanding, we maintain the systematic generation of trauma and suffering that these entities have been harvesting for 10,000 years. They win either way, through rebellion or through continued compliance. I extend my psychic awareness further, pushing past the observatory's dimensional boundaries to perceive the broader pattern these entities have woven across human space. Every Imperial institution contains seeds of the same manipulation, policies that seem designed to protect humanity while actually optimizing it as a suffering generation system, doctrines that create the exact conditions their creators claim to prevent. But as my consciousness expands, I encounter something unexpected: resistance. Not the chaotic opposition of chaos entities or the alien hostility of Xenos minds, but organized, purposeful intelligence that recognizes my awakening and responds with what feels like relief. There are others, I breathe, my voice carrying wonder that makes Sister Mordiana look up from her psychological recovery efforts. Other Imperial servants who've achieved similar clarity, scattered across the galaxy, working in isolation because they thought they were alone in questioning the system. Through frequencies that exist beyond normal space-time, I sense networks of communication between loyalist elements who've discovered the manipulation but lack coordination to act effectively against it. Tech priests who've found evidence of systematic information suppression. Inquisitors whose investigations have uncovered patterns that implicate their own institutions. Even Astartes who've begun questioning whether their recruitment from feral worlds optimizes trauma generation rather than producing the best possible warriors. Sister Valdris's expression shows the exact moment when her worldview crystallizes around a new understanding. We're not the first to discover this. The entities that benefit from current policies have been managing revelation events for centuries, ensuring that anyone who achieves clarity either dies in suspicious accidents or gets labeled as heretical and eliminated by their own institutions. The survivors from Kroger's bounty nod with expressions that suggest they've reached similar conclusions through their own experiences. They weren't randomly selected passengers on a merchant vessel. They were specifically chosen individuals whose psychological profiles indicated resistance to despair, whose survival would spread specific types of information through Imperial networks. Every witch hunt generates ripple effects, the junior engineer explains with clinical precision. Family members who witness executions, Imperial servants who carry out orders they find morally questionable, entire communities traumatized by purge operations. The entities feeding on this system don't just harvest the immediate suffering, they cultivate long-term psychological damage that generates sustainable energy sources across generations. Captain Kaelen activates display systems that project galactic maps showing psychic disturbance patterns across human space. But they've made a calculation error. They assumed that achieving clarity about their manipulation would necessarily lead to rebellion against Imperial authority. They didn't anticipate that loyalty to the Emperor and opposition to corrupted policies could coexist. I understand his meaning immediately. The God Emperor's sacrifice on the Golden Throne was meant to protect humanity from psychic threats, not to optimize humanity as a feeding ground for the exact entities he sought to oppose. Our current policies serve those entities rather than serving him, which means that questioning those policies represents deeper loyalty rather than heresy. The solution isn't rebellion, I say, feeling pieces of a cosmic puzzle clicking into place. It's reformation from within. If enough Imperial servants achieve clarity simultaneously, if we coordinate our resistance to manipulation rather than acting as isolated malcontents, we can transform the system without destroying it. Sister Valdris's battle cant conveys tactical questions, coordination methods, communication security, operational parameters for systematic reformation. But before we can begin planning specific actions, alarms sound throughout the observatory again. Not warnings about external attack, but notifications that our time here is ending. The pocket dimension that houses this facility exists on borrowed time, sustained by energies that can't be maintained indefinitely without risking detection by entities that would view our gathering as an unacceptable threat. You have to return, Captain Kaelen says with regret that carries 10,000 years of weight. Continue your missions, maintain operational cover, but begin identifying other Imperial servants who show signs of questioning current policies. Build networks slowly, carefully, without triggering the kind of dramatic revelations that would feed our enemy's agenda. The Forgotten gather around us as we prepare for extraction, each offering final pieces of intelligence that will help us recognize allies and avoid traps in the years ahead. But it's the tech priest who provides the most crucial information, coordinates for hidden data caches scattered throughout Imperial space, repositories of evidence that document the manipulation we've discovered. When enough people achieve clarity, he says through vox grills that sing with harmonics of hope, when the network grows large enough to act without being crushed by institutional inertia, you'll know what to do. As we board the extraction torpedo that will carry us back toward the Nemesis incarnate, I take one final look at the observatory, a beacon of sanity maintained by Imperial loyalists who've spent centuries preparing for the moment when their knowledge could be acted upon safely. Sister Valdris settles into her restraint harness with movements that suggest she's processing revelations that will reshape how she approaches every future mission. Sister Mordiana remains silent, but her eyes hold depths that weren't there before our arrival. We're returning to our ship as different people than we arrived. The question now is whether those differences will serve the Emperor's true will or play into the hands of entities that have been manipulating human civilization since before the Imperium's founding. The torpedo's engines ignite, carrying us back toward a reality where truth and duty may finally align after 10 millennia of tragic separation. Section 15. The return journey through the warp storm passes in contemplative silence, each of us processing revelations that reframe our entire understanding of service to the Golden Throne. The torpedo's machine spirit sings hymns of gratitude as we transition back into normal space-time, its artificial consciousness apparently relieved to escape the dimensional pocket where certainties dissolve and truth wears masks that shift according to the observer's perspective. The Nemesis incarnate appears through our viewports like a cathedral returning from pilgrimage, its blessed hull scarred by exposure to warp phenomena, but fundamentally unchanged by experiences that have transformed its passengers irrevocably. As we dock in the primary landing bay, I notice details that escaped previous observation. Crew members moving with the mechanical precision of individuals following orders they don't entirely understand, devotional carvings that emphasize suffering and sacrifice rather than hope and salvation, weapon blessings that focus on destruction rather than protection. The ship's astropath choir greets our return with psychic emanations that feel different now that I possess clarity rather than null negation. Where once I perceived only the background static of sanctioned Psykers maintaining communication protocols, I now sense undercurrents of suppressed doubt, carefully controlled despair, and the hollow resignation of individuals who've spent decades channeling energies they're taught to fear rather than understand. Sister Superior Valdris files our mission report through encrypted channels, her account focusing on successful elimination of psychic threats aboard the merchant vessel, while omitting details about our encounter with the observatory and its revelations. The omissions aren't tactical deceptions, they're operational necessities that protect information too dangerous to trust to standard Imperial communication systems. But as we return to our individual quarters for post-mission debriefing and equipment maintenance, I realize the most profound change isn't in what we've learned. It's in how we view our fellow Imperial servants. Every crew member we pass represents a potential ally who might achieve similar clarity if exposed to the right information under the right circumstances. The challenge lies in identifying those individuals without triggering the kind of dramatic revelations that would feed the entities we've discovered. Over the following weeks, as the Nemesis incarnate continues its patrol through sectors where unsanctioned Psykers hide among civilian populations, I begin to notice patterns in my sister's behavior that suggest the observatory's influence extends beyond our immediate group. Sister Mordiana takes longer to complete execution protocols, her blade hesitating for microseconds before delivering killing strokes. Other sisters ask questions about target selection criteria that they've never voiced before, their loyalty to duty complicated by growing awareness of the human cost our policies extract. The changes are subtle enough to avoid detection by standard psychological evaluation procedures, but profound enough to alter how we approach each hunt. Instead of viewing Psyker targets as threats requiring immediate elimination, we begin to see them as symptoms of a larger problem that might require solutions beyond violence. During a routine patrol of the Vaxxus system, we encounter a situation that tests our evolving understanding. A family hiding their 13-year-old daughter whose psychic abilities manifested during puberty. Standard protocol demands immediate execution of the child and interrogation of the parents for possible heretical corruption. But as I observe the girl through enhanced perception, I see not the seeds of demon possession, but raw potential that could be shaped into service to the Emperor rather than eliminated as a threat to public safety. Sister Valdris watches my reaction carefully, her own tactical assessment complicated by questions that didn't exist before our encounter with Captain Kaelen and his allies. The family represents everything our training has prepared us to destroy, unsanctioned Psykers attempting to evade Imperial justice, but they also represent everything the observatory's research suggests we should be trying to save. I make a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Instead of immediate execution, I recommend the family for transfer to specialized facilities where the child's abilities can be properly evaluated and potentially channeled into sanctioned Imperial service. The recommendation violates standard protocols, but it falls within operational parameters that allow for tactical flexibility in unusual circumstances. The report I filed describes the girl as exhibiting controllable psychic manifestation suitable for potential astropath training, a designation that ensures proper screening rather than summary execution. It's a small victory, probably meaningless in the broader scope of Imperial policy, but it represents the kind of incremental change that might accumulate into systematic reformation if enough servants achieve similar clarity. As we prepare for our next hunt in the Mordian system, ironically the same destination that Kroger's bounty had been attempting to reach, I reflect on how much has changed since we boarded that doomed merchant vessel. We're still witch hunters, still servants of the Silent Sisterhood, still sworn to protect humanity from psychic threats. But we're also something else now. Guardians of truth in an institution built on necessary lies. Reformers working within a system designed to resist change. And perhaps most importantly, proof that loyalty to the Emperor and opposition to corrupted Imperial policy can coexist. The entities that feed on human suffering made a fundamental miscalculation when they assumed that achieving clarity about manipulation would necessarily lead to rebellion against authority. Instead, it's led to deeper loyalty, not to the institutions that have been corrupted, but to the ideals those institutions were created to serve. Sister Valdris approaches my meditation alcove with news that our next target has been identified. Reports of mass psychic manifestation in Mordian Prime's Undercity, possibly involving dozens of unsanctioned Psykers operating in coordination. Under normal circumstances, such a report would trigger immediate purge protocols designed to eliminate the threat through overwhelming force. But as I prepare my equipment for another hunt, I find myself wondering whether we might discover something different in Mordian's depths. Not monsters requiring destruction, but people requiring rescue from a system that labels their gifts as heresy while remaining blind to the true source of corruption. The hunt continues, but the hunters have begun to understand that their quarry might not be their enemy. In the grim darkness of the far future, that understanding represents something precious and dangerous: hope. Conclusion. The shuttle carrying us toward Mordian Prime cuts through void black space like a knife through funeral silk, its blessed engines singing hymns of duty that harmonize with questions we're no longer afraid to ask. Through the armored viewports, I watch the hive world grow larger, its industrial towers reaching towards stars that burn with light both beautiful and terrible, much like the truth we've discovered about our sacred mission. In the weeks since our encounter with the observatory, the network Captain Kaelen described has begun to reveal itself. Coded transmissions hidden within routine Imperial communications, intelligence reports that ask precisely the right questions, even requisition orders that direct useful resources toward individuals who've achieved similar clarity about the manipulation embedded in our institutions. We are not alone in our understanding, and we are not the first to question whether current policies serve the Emperor or something else entirely. Sister Valdris has become more than a combat partner. She's become a co-conspirator in the most dangerous kind of heresy, the heresy of asking whether we're actually accomplishing what we claim to be accomplishing. Her tactical assessments now include variables that don't appear in any training manual: the psychological profiles of family members, the potential for rehabilitation rather than elimination, and the long-term consequences of policies that treat symptoms while ignoring underlying causes. The Mordian contact awaiting us in the Undercity isn't another witch requiring execution, but another Imperial servant who's discovered evidence of the systematic manipulation we've uncovered. The coded transmission that summoned us here came not from standard threat assessment protocols. but from networks that exist in the spaces between official channels, maintained by loyalists who understand that true service to the Emperor might require opposition to Imperial policy. As we prepare for insertion into Mordian Prime's depths, I reflect on how profoundly the nature of our hunt has changed. We still carry blessed weapons, still wear the armor of the Silent Sisterhood, still serve as instruments of the Emperor's will. But we no longer hunt witches. We hunt truth, pursuing understanding through labyrinths of deception that span millennia and encompass the fundamental assumptions upon which human civilization is built. The entities that feed on suffering made one crucial error in their cosmic manipulation. They assumed that achieving clarity would lead to despair, that understanding the scope of their influence would break the spirits of those who discovered it. Instead, it's led to something they cannot process or consume, purposeful resistance informed by hope rather than driven by hatred. We descend toward Mordian Prime's surface not as executioners, but as gardeners tending a garden that's been poisoned by those who claim to protect it. The work will take generations, the risks are beyond calculation, and success is far from guaranteed. But for the first time since taking my vows of silence, I can speak, not with voice, but with actions that serve truth rather than merely following orders. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But perhaps, if we're careful and patient and wise, we can begin to understand what we're truly fighting for instead of simply what we've been told to fight against. The Emperor protects, not the institutions that claim his authority, but those who serve his actual will rather than its corrupted interpretation. The hunt continues, but the hunters have become something new, gardeners of hope in a universe that has forgotten how to grow anything but suffering. The Emperor protects.